Good day and welcome, America and beyond. I'm Tom Donahue for Truth Matters and Tom Donahue Reports, and this is a follow-up on the Blockbuster files that continue to be released. Not all of them, but this latest batch from the Epstein files is astonishing, shell-shocking, bombshell galore. But before I get to those specifics, I just happened to watch tonight, and it's going viral. And it was talked about that Steve Bannon conducted an interview with Jeffrey Epstein, but it was being withheld. He wasn't releasing it. The Epstein estate and file, the Trump administration, there was no indication of release. I'm not sure how someone got their hands on it. I'm not sure how it got released, but it is spiraling in terms of viral nature. And I watched most of it. Some of it was a bit tedious, but let me tell you, and this is just gut reaction, just letting you, stream of consciousness, giving you a broader view of what I observed. Epstein being interviewed by Steve Bannon, and apparently Bannon was his media advisor, of all things, advising him on media projects, coaching him, a media coach, which is quite bizarre in and of itself. But they seem to be very friendly, very chummy, and they seem to be very respectful one another in light of the fact that Epstein had already served time and was categorized as a sexual predator. And this is before his second arrest and incarceration. So this YouTube video that's circulating, that it's definitely authentic, because you can, if you listen to Steve Bannon, whether when he was running the Trump campaign, or when he was serving under Trump, or the radio show podcast or Breitbart, it's Steve Bannon. But Steve Bannon was saying during the interview, he said, I'm keeping myself off camera, but there was no doubting that it was Steve Bannon. So Bannon's really intrigued with his mathematical mind and the way that he put together these financial formulas on Wall Street, and then eventually, had a camp and a foundation in New Mexico. And then for me, the shell shocker, and I think for many of our listeners, was he was invited by the Rockefellers, the Rockefeller Foundation, to serve as a board member. He became a financial advisor, and he talked at length about his friendship and admiration for David Rockefeller and also for Henry Kissinger. And then said that he was invited by David Rockefeller to become a member. You have to fill out an application, a member of the Trilateral Commission. So I did not know any of this. So it's making much more sense how influential and how he achieved such high heights. My gosh, if you're on the board of the Rockefeller Foundation, you're meeting and spending time with David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger. Then you're asked, hey, your financial contributions and insights, your bright mind, we would like you to be part of the Trilateral Commission. And then he talked about his trip to Japan for one of those trilateral meetings. And I was like, whoa, he's divulging this. Bannon's not challenging him on. Bannon is fascinated by, what was it like meeting these people? What was it like, it's like this. He's like Trump, like this whole, glomming onto celebrity and being around the rich and famous. To me, none of that ever mattered. It still doesn't matter. So Epstein, when you watch him in this video, you can see how he could influence people. You could see that he was very talented and very bright, very articulate. One of the things I wanted to remind the audience was when he was teaching at the Dalton School there in New York, the headmaster of that school that hired him was none other than Bill Barr's father. That's right. Bill Barr, who served under Bush and Trump and, ran the DOJ. So, there's a lot of these conspicuous, kind of like very odd ties to some of these cast of characters. And remember, Bill Barr was not going to release the Epstein files, and he had no interest. Well, a lot of people didn't know that his father certainly was kind of close associate, colleague when he was teaching mathematics. Now, from my understanding is Epstein doesn't even have a college degree, which doesn't mean he's not bright. But for him to be teaching at a prominent school, then he goes on without those credentials and then becomes high up in Wall Street with no formalized education or credentials to be a stockbroker or to be a financial advisor. But we at least now have a piece of the puzzle we didn't have before, that he was not only working with people that were rich and people that were influential, but now we know that the world order, the people that at the highest echelons of running the planet invited him in. He was a welcomed guest and contributor. There's no doubt when you listen to him and Bannon, because Bannon's a pretty smart guy, but they were intellectualizing, they were philosophizing, I don't know how you sit there with a well-known serial pedophile and sex trafficker and child rapist and have intellectual dialogue and discourse and be having this mutual admiration society. So Bannon, has always been questionable in my mind, even though he has done some good things. Now, here's something that also came out tonight. We're at the beginning of February of 2026, and it says the latest Epstein file releases present allegations. Again, these are allegations of underage rape, sex auctions, and even murder involving Trump. Again, these are, from my understanding, unsubstantiated, but these were claims. These were people that filed claims and alerted the authorities. New York Times uncovers 5,300 plus Epstein files mentioning Trump in an exhaustive search analysis. Over 5,300 mentions of Trump. We're not talking about 53. It's in like 5,300 plus. And what does Trump have to say about this in the recent days? Matter of fact, I believe it was his statements came either the last day of January or the first day of February. Trump claims the latest release of the Epstein files absolves him. Just because Trump says it doesn't mean that it's true. He's a pathological liar, habitual liar, an unreliable source for anything except for nonsense. How could anybody with that many mentions and with various other things that have come out recently that are just, you're aghast at some of these allegations. But yeah, he says he's been absolved. Oh, isn't that nice? And there's nobody in the administration, any of the federal agencies that would ever challenge Trump or investigate or prosecute. So Trump knows that until the Democrats take control next year, which they will, that there will be no investigations because there's no independent agencies. So Trump is off the hook in that regard in terms of criminal prosecutions. Representative Massey, Republican, GOP, from Kentucky, hits his critics after the latest Epstein files release. It was not a hoax. And if you've been listening to my programs, I call Trump the master of all hoax. He is the hoaxster. Not hoaxster, hoaxster, okay? And I coined that. So if you hear that anywhere else, they got it from listening to this show, okay? Now, in the Epstein files, it does show contact between Melania Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell. And Melania is complimenting her on her Vogue story and her pictures. And, and there was all these niceties between the two. But yeah, they were very chummy. And there's some researchers that are showing that Melania knew Epstein before she knew Trump. This director of this Melania film and had this modeling agency that worked with the Kit Kat Club and that would bring in these Eastern European women to meet people like Donald Trump and other powerful and rich and famous men. And so she was trying to, work her way into that sphere of financial and political and entertainment influence. And so we just don't know. It's a bit murky. The AP reports that the Epstein documents of the 3 million pages released just the other day said it contains thousands of references to Trump. Now, the DOJ killed some things that got out because remember, this is a massive amount in this files dump. I mean, this release. So, they're not catching everything. I mean, they're trying to, that is highly damning. But the DOJ killed certain Epstein files, but people took snapshots. They were able to retain what was posted originally. And it mentions wild Trump sex allegations, including rape. an underage girl, and this is TMZ, is very well connected with Fox. Maxwell claims that 25 Epstein accomplices reached secret settlements after abuse allegations. And this is reported by the New York Post. I'm going to continue the coverage on this. I have many podcasts I've done leading up to this. We are going to see it to its conclusion. Remember when Pizzagate was a big deal, and that maybe the Democrats and the liberals and they were doing these things, outside of in the underground of a pizza shop in D.C. and there was these pedophile rings. Well, here's the biggest pedophile ring that we know for facts that are factually happened. There's been prosecutions. There's millions and millions and millions of pages of documentation, and so why do we have to worry about a Pizzagate when we've got Trump and Clinton Gate, and we got the Epstein trafficking network here? There's no question. But that video that I saw, it's now making more sense. And you can watch it too. And I've got it posted at News Headlines at TalkStream Live. And you can find it on YouTube. And you can find it at, I think it was a Drudge Report. And there's been maybe a couple other outlets. But I think it's going to spread like wildfire. Certainly going to go viral. But those of you that are in the know, you're going to say, wait a minute. I'm not as interested in just, he and Bannon having this banter. Wait a minute. What did he just say? That David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, Trilateral Commission, on the board of the Rockefeller Foundation, financial advisor, working closely with them. But he really breaks down, the monetary system and talks about fractional reserve and some other things that are like, wow. I mean, this is, illuminating to say the least. And this is coming from a sex trafficker, a pedophile predator extraordinaire, meaning, of the nth degree, of the worst kind. But the information exchanged with Bannon is very interesting. If you can set aside these other things, but it's hard to do. You can see him in action. He's super smart. He's, he knows how to communicate in ways that you could see how influential and persuasive he could be. Well, then again, they say Satan and, the demonic realm is, full of these kind of serpent-tongued individuals. And they even got into spirituality, which, you'll find interesting if you watch that video. So I'm Tom Donahue for Tom Donahue Reports and Truth Matters.